So, welcome to another transmission of these beautiful teachings from A Course in Miracles. I call this Ascension with A Course in Miracles. I was sharing with my sweet friend Ginger before I started the recording that, I don't know what's going to come out of me. I don't prepare for these calls except for I know that I just come and I'm a vessel. And God's will is done through me. Whatever needs to be said is said through me. And I come to these gatherings with a clear awareness that there are a lot of notes to self. There are a lot of things that come through that I need to be listening to. And as my life continues to evolve in terms of my own expansion of my awareness of the truth of who I am, as I continue on this path of ascension, because it is an expansive, or it is a path of expansion. That's what ascension is. It's not just up, it's out. It's a stairwell that we are traveling on, a staircase, I should call it. It's a spiral staircase, and we always are moving further out beyond where we were before. Now, of course, that's what this cone signifies. It's an expansion out. When we're operating in the stories of the ego, and when we are caught up in our humanness, we spiral down. We come into a very small idea of who we are, what's possible, how things should be. There are always only 1, 2, 3 options. There is always only 1 or 2 or 3 solutions or possibilities or whatever. When we are moving on this path with God and we are spiraling out of limitation, there are bazillions of outcomes, bazillions of solutions and possibilities. And to be open to that level of potential, we have to unwind our mind from limitation. That's it. I mean, we're only going in one of 2 directions on the same road. And let's call this road the road of abundance. Because when you think about God and you think about what it has created, what it has been able to express itself as, it's abundant. There is no shortage of stars, of planets, of asteroids, of grains of sand, of blades of grass, of people. And when I say people, I'm talking about beings that appear to be similar to a human, even if they look totally different. And with that, I'll include, animals and flowers and so much that whether it's on this planet or extraterrestrial, our mind has been so limited. We can only go to one school. We can only go to, get 1 degree. Some people might get 2. A few might be really bold and get 3. But see how limited it is? You can only marry and be happy with the one person. There's only one partner. There's only one perfect car, one perfect house, one perfect job. So the mind has been on the road of abundance, but we have settled for the path on the road, which is just the beginning point. It's like, okay, yeah, there's 1 here, but there's 2 here, there's 3 here, there's 4 here, there's 5 here. There's infinite potential as we continue. But to be able to be comfortable on the road of abundance, to move from limitation, where we settle for the 1 for whatever is left over, to move from the beginning point towards infinite potential on everything. And see, most people, when if I say they're a road of abundance, they're thinking money. That's not what abundance is. That's one aspect. Abundance is all the different ways, all the different avenues for humanity, for God to express itself. How many ways do we allow ourselves to experience well-being? Are we abundant in our opportunities for well-being? I used to be a one-track mind. I used to believe doctor, that was it. I went to a medical doctor, and whatever that one doctor told me because I had to pick one primary physician. That was it. Then that was my only option. And as I began to expand my mind, I began to expand my awareness of God's infinite potential and the abundance of what God does. I began to discover, oh, there's all kinds of forms of healing. There's the Reiki route. You can move down the path of energy. There's the breathing route. You can learn about breath. Sweet Ginger here, she's one of those people who taught me about breathing for well-being. There are the paths of sound healing for well-being. There's the path of nature for well-being. I went to a naturopath. I went to holistic healers. I went to life coaches that were specifically on teaching about connecting with our soul. All of those avenues opened up an abundance of modalities for healing that were very different than my one primary doctor that I always went to. So yes, we are in a world of abundance. There are so many opportunities here. And when we can recognize that, that's wonderful. But the minds of people have been trained in limitation. That is why it is so difficult to get somebody who believes, like I did, would you just go to a medical doctor, to open up to holistic well-being, because that mind that is trained and that's the one, that's the only route that I'm going to go, does that out of fear. If I don't go there to get what I need to be well, then I'm not going to be well. So if I start trying all these other things, and I've been convinced that this is the only path for well-being, I'm not going to turn in that direction. The mind is not going to move in that direction unless there is an opening, and that opening is called curiosity. But to be curious, you must be in a place where fear doesn't run your life. Because if fear runs your life, you're going to run to the one. You're just going to operate in limitation. You're going to be contracted out of fear. To be able to be curious, there has to be a level of overriding that natural fear. And the only way to override your fear is by loving yourself enough to believe that you deserve more. That's it. It's either fear or love. One of the two runs your life. And in the beginning of this journey, this path of ascension, where we begin to expand out of limitations, there has to be a little bit of love for self, a little desire to make things better for ourselves, to expand from what we think is all that is there. And that path is so evident when you begin to look at relationships. So let's say a relationship, partners, and I'll just use man and woman because that's what's natural to me. So I was married, and like everybody else, I married the one. I was supposed to be, love till death do us part. And the marriage began to shift. This is my baby daddy. And it became really clear. I'm moving down a path where I'm expanding my awareness of what's possible. And he's very much, this is the way that it is. And as I am loving myself enough to go, you know what, I'm not going to be in fear of what if this relationship is not forever? What if I begin to love myself enough to see, well, what else is there that I maybe have not been taught? And I was moving on this path of curiosity about religion, and curiosity about careers, and curiosity about parenting, because I had little ones at the time. Curiosity about for a very long time, I focused on religion. I was so curious, how could religion be something that activated so much fear when it's supposed to lead me to be in oneness with God, so that I and the Father could be one? Because I grew up Catholic, so I followed the teachings of Jesus. Primarily, I was a very traditional Catholic or traditional Christian. I did the Sunday thing. Sometimes I went Wednesday nights, and I, of course, always went to the Christmas service. So I was a good practicing Catholic. But I knew what I needed to know, but for the most part, yeah, whatever. I'll Sunday I'll repent. And I actually went to confessionals when I was little. Growing up in the Dominican Republic, our churches had those creepy boxes where you'd get in on one side and you're a little kid getting into this little dark wooden, it felt like a little latrine. That's because it reminded me, my grandfather's house had a latrine. So we had a little outhouse, and walking into this confessional felt like I was walking into the outhouse. But there's somebody on the other side listening to what I'm saying. It was creepy. But anyhow, thank goodness, I don't have to do that anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago. But I started questioning religion. I got curious about religion. As I began to get curious about religion, I began to expand my awareness of the politics of religion, the controls of religion, the money of religion. I began to realize, oh my gosh, so much of it is made up and to control people. Well, that sent me on a path to get curious about the education system. And I went down that rabbit hole. But I also went down the rabbit hole of relationships, of realizing, I'm married and I made these vows till death do us part. And there was guilt. Well, what if it's time for me to be done with this relationship. So I felt the guilt and the shame and the fear. Oh, what are people going to think? Am I going to be okay without this partnership? And I had to get curious. I had to love myself enough to say, you know what? Maybe it'll be uncomfortable for a little bit, but what if there's something better for me on the other side? What if for my children, there's something better because they're not subject to a pretend relationship? What if there's something better for my kid's dad? And I began to be open to the possibility out of love, because love is love. Love is wanting what's best for everybody. And it shows up in so many different ways. So from that, I began to explore the possibilities of getting divorced, what that was going to look like, open up to walking down that path, not by myself, but with those who had done it before. And it became actually a beautiful journey. And by the time that I felt, okay, I am ready, I was able to communicate with Philip and let him know where I was, that I was complete in this I had nothing else that I could give to this relationship because I felt complete. And I waited a couple of years until he felt that he was comfortable and strong enough and cried his tears and went through his fears. I did that without him knowing that I was doing that. And then I was present for him doing his own, moving through some of his journey. And then we prepared the kids so that they would know what was coming. And 12 years, no, it's been longer than that. 15 years later, I guess, maybe 16, 17, 18 years later, he's been married for 12 years in a beautiful relationship. It was better for him than having been with me, who didn't want to be there. Our kids are absolutely, all of them are so clear that it's best for us to be on our own different paths. But I had to love myself enough to move beyond my fears and get curious. So no matter what it is that we are becoming curious about, it's an act of self-love to begin to look at another way. So I'll leave you with that little tidbit that is coming through me, because that is so powerful. I wish more people understood that curiosity is an act of self-love, and we would be less quick to defend something or to need to be right about something. Because if you need to be right, then you're in fear. If you are curious, you don't need to be right about anything, because you know that there is an abundance of perspectives. There's an abundance of possibilities. So you can be right. I can be right. This one can be right. There's lots of ways for people to be correct about an aspect of whatever it is that is being discussed. But if we don't hear, if we're not curious enough to hear everybody's opinions, we're missing all the ways that God is attempting to give us through its expression in different ways, aspects of the same thing, perspectives of the same thing. And last week, yes, amen, sister. So last week we were looking still in chapter 30. You know, we can't rush through the Course in Miracles. Anybody who rushes through a Course in Miracles, I know, is not really absorbing the depths of it, because there's no way to rush through this. It's so rich. But we're in chapter 30, and the title of chapter 30 is The New Beginning. And we are still in section number 5, The Only Purpose. And today we're going to look at paragraph number 8. Last week, paragraph number 7 was so beautiful. I even got weepy when I was sharing what was in there, because in paragraph number 7, we are being told that we stand at the edge of the real world. We stand at the edge of moving out of limitation and stepping into infinite potential. And again, it is not just about money. This is the world of money. This, everything runs here on money because we've been conditioned and trained. The ego is all about money. Ego self-worth is tied to its net worth. When you move into the new earth, that's not what runs the world. Is it an aspect of the world? It could be, but that's not what runs the world, because you don't need money to exchange, to trade, to be able to operate from a place of utilizing our powers to create. Do you think God uses money? How many planets did God buy into existence? 0. God doesn't buy anything. God just wills whatever it desires to be expressed. We're moving into a 5th dimension where we're going to be operating, creating what we desire. You want a mansion? Just call it into manifestation. Like God wanted an extra planet or an extra galaxy, it calls it into manifestation. It doesn't go to the bank and get a loan so it will go create another galaxy. I mean, how silly would that be for God to stand in line to wait for a loan officer? That's only in the silly human games that we play, where we have been so conditioned into limitation, and only the bank has the money, which is crazy. I mean, talk about disempowering our creative abilities. But that's part of the education process, which once I got curious about, how did the education process as it was at the time come to be? Well, as it is still today, because I went down that rabbit hole. It's only been 20 years, so it's still the same thing. When we are willing to access the truth of who we are, when you're curious enough, by loving yourself enough into allowing for the possibility that there's so much more than what you've been conditioned to believe there is, you cannot help but come to the place to know, especially through teachings like A Course in Miracles, that you are created by a creator to create. So if you're only chasing one thing, you're not creating, you're regurgitating, you're repeating, you're reenacting, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. And what do they tell us that is? Insanity. So instead of being on that hamster wheel chasing the one and trying to make the marriage work that's not working, trying to make the job work that's not working, trying to make the whatever work that's not working, because it's letting you know, okay, it's time for you to move on. But you're holding on for dear life because that's the one. You're missing out on accessing your ability to create. Because if you're complete with this, go on to something else. We're eternal beings. We're not meant to hold on to the same thing forever. We're meant to flow. That's what is right here. When we move into the 5th dimension, we're flowing. Last week, we were learning about this beautiful, beautiful place that we're at. When your mind is at that level of consciousness, we stand, as it says here, already at the edge of the real world. You know, the world that we are operating in, that the ego has made, is really, it's a simulation. It's a made-up world of suffering, of limitation, of birth and death and chaos and greed and haves and have-nots. Aren't you like tired of playing that silly, immature game? I know I am. I love myself enough to be done with the game of limitation. I want to move to the game of expansion, a game of infinite possibilities. We stand at the edge of that new world, but you can't create that new world, that new earth, if you bring your old thinking with you. Because if your old thinking of limitation comes with you to the new world, guess what's going to happen? Same old thing. You can tell somebody, oh, we're going to send you to this brand new place, and you can create whatever you want. And you take your mind with you, your old thinking, and you land there, and you're the first one there, and you still think in limitation, you're going to begin to create the rules and regulations that allow for that limitation to seem logical. Well, call that the government's red tape. The illogicalness of our government, of the rules and regulations that they place on people, whether it's at the local level or the national level, it's mind-boggling when you sit back and go, what? People have to jump through all these hoops? Well, that's because if your thinking is still based on 3D consciousness, you stand on this side of the new earth. You don't even know that there's a new earth because there's a curtain, there's a veil, there's a block to what is possible. But if you love yourself enough to say there's got to be more, then you're willing to take the risks. You're willing to try new things. You're willing to hear what others have to say. And you begin to realize, oh my gosh, there's other ideas. There's already, there are so many different ways of doing things. Then we stand at the edge of that new creation. Every generation stands at the edge and takes us forward. And inside of A Course in Miracles last week, we're learning about that. So if we are going to be moving towards that new reality, what are one of the things that we have to let go of? Idols, authorities outside of us. We've got to let go of those that we think have power, those that tell us what to do, those that create the red tape, those who like the church, tell you, well, yeah, the marriage, it's till death do you part. If not, you're a sinner. We got to let go of that. We've got to let go of idolizing those who tell us how things should be, that operate in limitation. If they only see things one way, then you want to run away from that. You don't want to stay in the place of one way. You want to move to infinite possibilities. So then we are told that those who are living on the edge, they have joined their hands with the Christ. They have decided to follow the Christ. And what is the Christ? So let's look at two parts to Jesus. There's Jesus, the human, you and I being the humans, having an incarnation, appearing to be separate from one another. That's Jesus, had an ego. You and I have an ego, which is the ability to think in opposition to God. Jesus went through his work. He did what he needed to do. He learned from others. Talk about loving himself enough to be curious. And he studied with the Essenes. He studied in the Far East, and he learned so many things. He studied meditation practices. None of those things were taught in the Jewish faith. He went outside of that. So he knew he had to go beyond that. So he was looking for other possibilities other than what he was being indoctrinated with. So he has his experiences, then he has his awakening. Jesus, like every one of us who come to this on this path, has a moment of awakening. And for him, and I see that there are two awakenings. There's the awakening where we begin to see that there's got to be more, where we begin to get curious about God and Jesus, and we move in that direction. And then there's the awakening where you and God are one, where you have seen the ego and you don't let that run your life. Because once you choose to merge, to align with God, not my will, but yours be done, it's that second awakening where the awakening is complete. Before that, you're in the process of awakening. Once you know that you and the Father are one, and you live by that in humbleness and not trying to convince anybody else about it, but you go about living your life that way, then you're awake. You are one who is awake. Until then, you're one who is awakening. So when Jesus was going through his process of awakening, then he had his experience that, by all accounts, not only what I have read, my own experiences in communication with Jesus, when he went through his baptism in the River Jordan by John the Baptist, he that was a moment where ego was fully dissolved and Holy Spirit kicked in. That is when he knew without a shadow of doubt, he was no longer searching, learning about who he was and what God was and what was beyond the limitations of the Jewish faith. When he knew it, it was during that time in his baptism. And he then went on to the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert to integrate what he had just experienced. When he integrated the truth that he and the Father were one, that moment of acceptance of the truth of who he is what is known as the Christ. That is when he knew the truth of who he was. So then he went on to teach. He spent then the next 3 years until his crucifixion. They crucified him because he was teaching that he was one with God and so is everybody else. Well, that's not convenient to the people who want to be the idols and want to tell you what to believe. So he's telling people, you don't have to believe what they're saying, but those people operated from fear. The majority operated in so much fear that they were not willing. They didn't love themselves enough to be curious. They stayed in fear. And we're not going to get into all the fears that they had, but it's the same fears that we have today. Primarily fear of getting, in trouble, being punished, and having what little they had settled for being taken from them. So we have Jesus, the man who went through the work that was necessary to remember the truth of who he is, and that then turns him into the Christ. Every one of us who moves through this journey of expansion, of ascension, of awakening, we will eventually know the point when we have also become the Christ, meaning you and God are one. There is nothing outside of you that runs your life. Now, I'm not 100% there yet. I sit in that a lot, but there are still areas that I'm still learning where I go outside of myself for security, for whatever it might be. So the journey is to be grounded in that Christness 100% of the time. So last week we were seeing that the only way to come to the edge of the new earth is you have held the hand of the Christ, meaning you're following in Jesus's footsteps, because you know that he is showing us the way, as he told us 2,000 years ago. So when we come to know that Jesus is leading us towards finding the Christ within us, then we learned that we can't remember what God is while we are descending into the ego world, into the 3D world. So God has to remain unremembered. Those are the exact words in A Course in Miracles. So as we begin to get curious and we begin to see what Jesus has to say, we hold Jesus's hand and we are walked into the awareness. We are guided into, through teachings, through inner guidance, through, however it happens, walk in nature, you begin to have revelations. And these revelations allow you to access truths that have been dormant within, unremembered, because you were playing the game of forgetting the truth of who you are, so you could go on this journey of remembering. And then when you begin to remember that God is love, because you begin to get curious and you begin to go down the path of discovering really what is religion about. And you see the politics of it, you see the hierarchy of it, you see the money part of it, and you can separate the business of religion from the heart of religion, which is to teach spirituality. And you begin to see, oh, so this was used to make this profitable. And then you have to separate the two. And then you move down your own journey of discovering the more that there is about spirituality than the limited teachings that we have been given, which is basically, you're no good, you're a sinner, you're going to go to hell. One option. I mean, isn't that like crazy that we all follow this path and it has one option and it's never a happy one? But the truth is that the man who was willing to sacrifice his body because he knew he was not a body was giving us infinite possibilities. I'll talk about an abundance of places to go after our incarnation is complete, where the path of of Catholicism was, you're a sinner, you're going to go to hell. So one-way ticket. But when I moved down this path, it was like, oh my gosh, infinite possibilities. I can come back to the 3D world and have a little more suffering. I can move into more of a 4D consciousness and incarnate, but have a happier experience. I can move into the fifth dimension where there's no bodies, where there's not a physical body. There's a crystalline body. Oh, I like that possibility too. So all of a sudden, there's an abundance of options when you begin to question what you've been taught is the only way. So last week, we were told that as we begin to remember God, we have to practice forgiveness, because the world, the crazy world, is an opportunity for forgiveness. I had to forgive, my parents who taught me about relationships. I had to forgive the church who taught me the lies about, where I was going to end up. I had to forgive my grandmother for trying to put so much fear in me. I had to forgive a lot, especially I had to forgive myself for having bought into the game of limitation. And then I had to be grateful that I played that game so that I could see with contrast what I no longer prefer. I was in a marriage, two marriages that helped me see what I don't want in a marriage and what I do prefer in a marriage. So what I do prefer, I'm holding on for that. I am not going to settle for limitation when I can have infinite possibilities. And guess what? For me, because I know I'm eternal, if it doesn't happen in this lifetime, it'll happen in another one. And it's okay with me. Nothing has to happen on my timing anymore, because that's quite limited. I prefer the timing that aligns everything in perfection, and let that be a beautiful, wonderful co-creation, because I'm not afraid of being alone, because I'm not alone. I'm one with all that is. So once you begin to not have fears, you begin to expand. You gain an abundance of possibilities. It's freaking amazing. So then we are told that as we begin to know the love of Christ, as we begin to feel the love within us that gets activated when you recognize God is a God of love, and it is in you, and you begin to love the life force that animates you. You begin to fall in love with the truth of who you are. You begin to feel this deep compassion and just awe for the magnificence of the life that you have had, that you, the being, the soul, the spirit, the whatever you want to call it, that has been there and has witnessed all of these things, was never affected by any one of the circumstances that happened. That you move out of the limitation that I am what happened to me at birth, or I am what happened to me at 2 years old, or I am what happened to me at 10 years old, or I am the result of what dad did to me at 7 years old. Once you are no longer limited by that one thing that happened to you, then it's as if your mind is wiped clean of all of those memories of limitations, and all of a sudden you're developing a relationship with the eternal you that was always there, never affected. And as you begin to love the amazing resilience of the soul, the amazing compassion that allows for the forgiveness of these people who did the thing that one time, and you begin to realize that just like you, they too fell under the illusion of their ego. They too fell under the game of separation. They too bought into limitation. You begin to have such incredible reverence for all the souls, all the spirits that are playing all of these limited roles in your life, this lifetime and all lifetimes. And you begin to feel this incredible love and compassion and gratitude. And that begins to help you feel what God is. Then the Christ in you becomes awakened. Then the Christ in you that says, not my will, but thine be done, because I'm on the side with God that has infinite possibilities, not the ego that has always limited options. I'm going to move to the side of not using my human little pea brain that only sees problems and solutions. I'm going to move to where God is, where there are no problems, where there are only opportunities, where everything is an invitation for expansion, you can see clearly, then you can choose the ways of the ego and limitations, the way of the 3D world versus what I don't know much about yet, because it's not in my conscious awareness. It's still unremembered because I needed to not remember my infinite nature so that I could experience my limited sense of self in this lifetime. And once you can appreciate the whole freaking game of contraction and expansion, of limitation and infinite possibilities, then you sit in wonder. Holy cow, the creative source is really freaking creative. Then you only want that, because it'd be insane to limit yourself again. So let's see what happens in paragraph number 8, because once you accept the Christ in you, and you know that that is you remembering that God is in you, and if God is in you, God is you. I mean, how can you separate the two? You can't. It's not like you're going to drain God out of you, like you can drain the blood out of a body, and then there's blood over here and an empty body over here. It can't happen that way. What happens is that the life force that pulses your every beingness, you realize that is what God is, meaning that's what you are. You cannot not be the life that pulses through you. But of course, there's a process of humbling, of letting go of specialness and thinking of, self-serving ideas and fears and worries, and it's a process of ascending into that full 100% trust that you and God are one. Paragraph number 8 says, so how light and easy is the step across the narrow boundaries of the world of fear when you have recognized whose hand you hold! Exclamation mark. Once you make the decision, okay, instead of holding on for dear life to this little world, little idea of what's possible, and you say, no, God, I'm going to hold your hand. Or you could start with Jesus if that feels more comfortable, or Holy Spirit, or whatever. I'm going to hold your hand. Please take me out of here. Reminds me of the Calgon commercial. Calgon, take me away. God, take me away. Take me away from the insanity. I'm ready to go. But you're not going to move. You're not going to be taken beyond what you are curious about. You're not going to be taken from here to there. You're going to be taken through every step on that spiral out of the insanity, because God loves us so much to ease us out of our mental limitations. This is why so many of you, whether you're here today or you're going to watch this later, it takes us a long time to undo. We look at the same things. We look at our attachments for years. We look at our fear of changing jobs for years. We look at our fear of letting go of items because we have to hoard them for years, because we're not comfortable with instant popping out of the illusion, because that requires that you accept that you don't need it. But while you're holding on to it, there's a part of you that needs that old way, and God gently meets us where we're at and takes us out of it at our pace. I just said that, and I'm being reminded, but buckle up, Buttercup, because all of humanity is in a doldrums that we are going to be shaken from. Right now, we have given so much, all of our power away to others outside of us who do not have our best interest at hand. And this whole little planet, the little planet that could, is getting shaken up. It's getting shaken up, and their lives are being shaken. Their foundation of what is reality, their foundation of safety, their foundation of what they could count on is being shaken, especially here in America, where we thought we were the last bastion of freedom. We were the last place where, we could be safe and nobody was going to come in and mess with our perfect little country. That's being shaken to the core, because we have placed our trust on idols. We just studied that in a couple of sections ago. We placed our idol, we gave authority for ourselves outside of ourselves. So to come back into God, who is the ultimate authority, we're going to have to do it gently, but it starts with holding that hand, because we become curious enough, which is the beginning step of self-love. And as we begin to get curious, we're willing to turn and look at other options. So if you've been deciding for 3 years between staying here or moving here, and you still can't make that choice, then you've got to acknowledge to yourself it's because you're not ready for possibilities. You're not ready for more. You feel safe in the limitation, in the known. So you're not ready for that leap that is going to take you to what awaits us, which is so amazing. But you can't have the amazingness if you're holding on to this one, security blanket that really, it has no security whatsoever, but it provides the illusion of it. So we are being told, within your hand is everything you need to walk with perfect confidence away from fear forever, and to go straight on and quickly reach the gate of heaven itself. In our hand is everything that we could possibly know. Why? Because our hand is animated by God. In our hand is the essence of the life force that we must choose to hold, to allow it to hold us and walk us out of the insanity. Repetition is lack of faith. Repetition is trying to do things, the same way, expecting a different result. It's not going to give that to you. You must reach for the hand that wants to get you out. That means you got to put faith. For example, if you're going to study A Course in Miracles, do what it tells you to do. Follow the steps, do the practices. Because if you do the practices, you're training your mind into trusting, into believing, into remembering the truth of your power. Then you begin to gain faith in that possibility, and you begin to lose faith in that limitation. You begin to remember that there is so much more, that you're never going to be left by a loving God to fend for yourself. You're always going to be supported every step of the way. Then it goes on to say that for he whose hand you hold was waiting but for you to join him. You see, God has been there all along. Jesus has been there for us all along, waiting for us to get curious about what they have to offer, instead of following what the one religion teaches you is the path for you. Instead of blindly, out of fear, doing what you're told, you begin to love yourself enough and go, I deserve more. I deserve more than this crazy shit that I've been believing. I deserve more than to live in fear. I deserve more than to live in limitation, to live on a hamster wheel, just going around in circle, chasing things. I deserve more. That's self-love right there. What else is there? There's got to be another way. So we've got to be willing to reach for the hand that's been there waiting for us always. See, when I was born, when you were born, you entered into the world of forgetfulness. But God didn't forget that you forgot. God remembered that you forgot, and gently and lovingly sent us reminders through books, through teachers, through nature, through whatever paths, through songs, to bring us to the place that we would want to remember it, through desires in our heart, through longings for returning to that truth. Those were always there. We forgot God. God didn't forget us, but God remembered that we forgot. And that's where God's patience, God's gentleness can be felt. And it sends us its son, Jesus. And it sent us his daughter, Mary. And it sent us another daughter. Think of somebody else that, that you could count on, or another son that has been a wonderful presence in your life. sent you a sister in me. It sends all those who are willing to do the work, to become examples of the work that needs to be done, but we have to follow the steps. And that's what's so beautiful about the teachings of A Course in Miracles. Jesus said, all right, the church lied to you. So let me just give you the facts. Let me give you the information straight out of the horse's mouth. So here it is, Course in Miracles, step by step, how to get out of the insanity of the ego. And you know what? Most people don't even know what the ego is. Most people think they know what ego is, but really have no clue what the ego is. I didn't. And that's really what has been, for me, what has allowed me to come to the level of awakening that I'm at, to come to the place in the journey where I'm at, where I don't have idols outside of me. I don't have, I'm not afraid of anything outside of me. I'm operating from a trust within. And it may not look like what people would like to see a spiritual teacher life look like, because I'm not living for what other people think about me. I'm doing what I am being guided to do and is the most fulfilling for my incarnation, not for what anybody else thinks. But this path is available to everybody, and it's going to look different for everybody, but it starts with a willingness, to hold the hand of the one who's been waiting for us all along. Now that you have come, would he delay in showing you the way that he must walk with you? No, the minute you say, I'm going to go, just everything lines up to assist us. His blessings lies on you as surely as his Father's love rests upon him. Jesus, the human, went through a life experience that the church has used deliberately to make us afraid of ending up crucified. We don't want to be crucified because we think we're bodies. And then we don't want to be crucified because if we get crucified because we're a body, then we're going to go to hell a lot sooner. So, well, we might as well not follow really Jesus's path, because it's only going to get us to hell faster. So in the back of our mind, there's that very corrupted belief system. Jesus, in A Course in Miracles, wants us to understand we're not a body. He didn't die. He released his physical vessel to give us an example that we can do that too. We can release all of our fears if we stop being so attached to the body, thinking that we are a body. So once we accept that what we are is non-physical energy that is eternal forever, once the mind is comfortable knowing that truth of who we are, then what happens is you begin to experience a lot more liberation, a lot more awareness of your infinite potential, your infinite possibilities. That's why if it happens in this lifetime, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't, because you're not attached to outcomes of the body. You are in alignment with your eternal self. I'd much rather wait another 2 lifetimes for a beautiful partnership with all that I know is possible, than spend the rest of this lifetime with somebody out of fear that I don't want to be alone, or I need their income so that I can afford whatever. I'm not doing that. Been there, done that. That would be hell. For me, it's so clear that when I took the hand of Jesus, I had to face every one of my fears. That's the walk that Jesus does with you. Jesus doesn't walk you to the light and go, oh, this is it. Jesus holds your hand, the teachings, specifically the teachings of the Course. Jesus assisted me in making sense of what the Course was saying while I was going through a divorce of my husband after my baby daddy, when I married Ken. Jesus held my hand when my son was going through a 4-year drug adventure where I didn't know many times if I was ever going to see my son alive again, because I knew he was going to a party and he was going to get high, and I didn't know what kind of drugs he was taking. Was it laced with this, that, or the other? We'd already gone to enough funerals of friends who had died of overdoses because there was fentanyl or whatever in the stuff that they were taking. I did not know. Talk about hell. I walked through the unknowing of what was possible but I held the hand of the one who knew we're just facing fears. All we're doing is we're facing fears. You face that fear, sister, and we're going to get you to the other side. And as I faced that fear and I decided, I'm not going to be afraid of you, and if my son dies, he dies, but his body is not who he is. He's an eternal being. As I turned the corner and I began to align with the truth that is true for me and everybody else, I began to feel this expansion, this freedom that allowed me to ground myself more and more and more in the peace that passes all understanding. But that's because I followed Jesus's hand, faced the fears. So for example, if you are dealing with letting fears of letting go of something, stuff, a job, whatever it is, if you hold the hand of Jesus, ask for guidance. But here's the thing, you must do the thing you're afraid of doing, because that's on the other side that you're going to see that you survived. If you're afraid of letting go of a job or letting go of stuff, do it, let it go. On the other side, you're going to find the freedom that you're going to go, damn, I wish I'd have done that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. But we do it when we do it. And when we do it, we are free. We become free from there on to allow an abundance of other opportunities to show up in our lives. And then it goes on to say, his gratitude to you is past your understanding, for you have enabled him to rise from chains and go with you together to his Father's house. You see, this is such a powerful metaphysical example, visual. We are all God, expressing itself in different ways. Every one of us that is down here, suffering in the muck and the mire of the ego, stuck in limitation, stuck in just anxiety and depression. If you're there, so is Jesus. The Christ is there. As we begin to follow the path and each of us frees ourselves, we allow another little bit of the Christ to arise, to move closer to the acceptance of the truth of who we are as God. You see, God is not suffering in limitation, but an expression of God, you and me, is suffering in limitation. We are being asked to love ourselves enough to get curious about another way. And Jesus is just one of the teachers that have shown us another way, because they have faced their fears, moved beyond them. Crucifixion, hello, talk about the biggest fear that most of us have is death. Moved through that to show us I'm not dead. He came back afterwards. Talk about, I'm sure some people were scared, more scared after they recognize that Jesus returns and without a physical body as a being of light. That probably scared them a lot more than that they possibly could end up on the cross with Jesus, next to Jesus. Each and every one that is suffering holds the Christ stuck in chains, in limitation. So maybe by now, maybe 1 billion of us have moved, have done the work, have moved above, but there's 6-7 billion still stuck here. Well, guess what? They can do that because it's a planet of free will. We can do whatever we want. But those who will to move beyond and hold the hand of one who's done the work is assisting in the freeing of all of the consciousness of humanity. And until all the consciousness of humanity has been freed of limitation and turns around on the road to abundant, infinite possibilities, there's still a brother or a sister stuck inside of that density. And each and every one of us who holds the hand of the Christ, who embodies the Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, we become examples for many to follow, for many to be able to see the way out. Because if you can do it, so can they. If I can do it, anybody can. So I just keep sharing how I've done what I've done. And anybody who wants to listen, great. If they don't, it's okay. They'll hear from somebody else. or they won't if they don't feel like it in this lifetime. They maybe 10 more lifetimes if they want to keep going down the spiral of hell. That's okay. We are free to do that because the love of the Father has no limits. It's unlimited, and it's not limited to only loving us when we do what God wills for us to do. It loves us unconditionally, regardless of what we do or don't do. But if we choose to follow this path, here we are told we can move into the Father's house. We can move into the place of heaven on earth. We can co-create a happy dream right here, right now. But we have to get curious about another way. We have to love ourselves enough to be willing to end the suffering. So with that, transmission is complete. Thank you all so much for being here with me live. I just love being able to share this with, even if it was only one of you here. But when two or more are gathered, there is love. If you watch this episode later on YouTube, this one is going to be 138. So there's 137 other episodes you can find on my YouTube. And that is at Laina Orlando, Laina Orlando on YouTube. All right, everybody. Love you all so much. And here we are, February 21, 2024. Keep your seatbelts buckled as we continue this journey of ascension. Love you all. Bye-bye.